there was an article that Kale actually sent to me last week, and I thought of you immediately. It is in 538, and it's titled, Why Democratic Appeals to the Working Class Are Unlikely to Work. All right, so obviously I know you're going to have thoughts about this. The reason why I wanted to bring you on is not just because you're somebody who studies labor and studies the working class, but as I think lots of our viewers know, you yourself ran for office on a working class platform. And we have an entire video about that on the channel. So if people are interested in the kind of postmortem of your campaign, definitely go check that out. We can get into a little bit of that later. But I want to dive into this article, right? So obviously there's been a lot of talk going on about the Democrats kind of losing working class voters. We've talked about this on the show before. This is basically a decades-long process that I think is really starting to intensify. And as a result, you now have not just people on the left, but Democratic, mainstream Democratic strategists and commentators also now starting to say, what can we do about this? The Democratic Party is losing its working class base. This is having a huge toll on elections nationwide. We need to do something to reverse this trend. So along comes this 538 article, and the author basically argues two pieces. Two things, and I'll just lay that out quickly for people who haven't seen the article yet. So she argues that, number one, when these strategists and when people basically say that Democrats should really try to make economic bread and butter appeals to working class people to try to win these voters back, this author says, when you say that, you're actually just talking about white working class voters. So that's the first part of her argument. The second part, and I know you're already getting excited, the second part is that she then says that this is a fool's errand. Trying to appeal to the white working class is a fool's errand because she doesn't say this as explicitly as like some liberal commentators do, but she basically says the white working class is too racist or too attached to kind of cultural values and, racial resentments to vote for Democrats ever again, basically. So the gist is that she's saying it's not a worthwhile project to try to put forth a strong economic bread and butter platform. She writes in her piece, these messages are unlikely to work on their own because the dividing line in the American electorate is not economics, it's race and culture. All right, so I have a few thoughts, of course, but I'm going to open it up to you, Paul, because like I said, not only are you somebody who, follows this issue, who knows a lot about labor and about, economics and the working class, but you are a former politician yourself. So, Paul, is the dividing line in America culture and race, and is economics doomed to fail?
Wow, where to start? I guess I'll start by saying, these appeals are not likely to work. It'd be nice if we tried. How about we try them first?
Right.
That would be a good place to start. And this article, it's really confused, and they don't ever land in this article on a solution or like a proposed idea. They don't even say we actually should double down on appealing to race and culture. They just kind of leave it at nothing. But I think a really simple question should be asked by anyone reading this article if Democrats used to win working class voters, why was that? What were they doing to do that? And I think there'd be a huge answer right in the center saying, well, there was New Deal policies and then there wasn't. And what's interesting about that too is, thinking about the New Deal coalition, it united many different ethnicities and races, and not just purely white and black, but even different white ethnic communities where those differences among white ethnics used to matter, I think, a lot more than they do today. And that they were united around the New Deal coalition. So that's a clear thing right there. And also, I think even looking at, again, going back to Bernie Sanders, no, he didn't win the Democratic primary in 2016 or 2020, but he really did extremely well with working class voters. Certain areas like West Virginia, in the Midwest, and as I always point out, he was second best among black voters in 2020, but also working class white voters. So these are very clear signs that this worked. And I think also forgetting that a big part of Donald Trump's message, especially in 2016, along with the racist and xenophobic stuff, was also anti-NAFTA, pro reindustrializing, talking about jobs. I think that was a big draw for many white voters. So
Definitely.
maybe I'll just start there.
Yeah.
To
Yeah. On that last point, I'm sure you've seen there's like some great CNN footage of them just juxtaposing Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump talking about trade, and they really do sound the same. And I think, when CNN ran this clip, their kind of angle was like, ugh, like these two like outsider fringy populists. But obviously watching it from the perspective of, somebody who's interested in deindustrialization and how that's affected the manufacturing sector and by extension the American working class, like it was really interesting to see Donald Trump talking about trade in that way. So yeah,
And
there's that.
another thing too, and this is a really just consistent mistake people continue to make, is overstating the amount of working class support Trump had. It was there. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But when you really look at the hard data, it shows that, I mean, he was carried over the top by more affluent upper middle class people.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people traditionally in the Republican Party base. So again, I don't want to deny the working class support. And as we can talk about a little bit more, even support among different races as well.
Right.
But I think people overstate it and they paint a picture where it was this like full on working class revolt, and that's his entire base, and that really just misses the point. And I think the bigger story in American politics is just how working class people have dropped out from electoral politics. And this is of all races. I think that's really the bigger story we have to deal with.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it's I think it should be said that when we talk about working class voters abandoning the Democratic Party, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are voting Republican, although of course many of them are. But like you just said, a lot of it is just people dropping out of the political process entirely. And in some ways that's like a worse thing because it's very, very difficult to re-engage people once they drop out of the process. On your point, to your point about it happening with workers of all races, like I want to go to this part in the article where, she sort of makes the case that making broad economic bread and butter appeals is trying to win over specifically the white working class. Like that is a claim that she makes in the article. And I obviously have a bone to pick with that. And I mean, back when you were on the show, we would talk about this all the time. I think that it cannot be said enough. Economic bread and butter appeals don't just work, I think that it's completely disingenuous to sort of act like that's a dog whistle to only white workers. I think that we have mountains of evidence that show that Latino, Asian, Black workers all respond to this type of messaging. Again, it's not that it's a home run every time, because obviously messaging isn't like the only thing that matters in a campaign. But we have a lot of evidence to support that, like basically every racial group of working class voters, prioritizes these economic issues and responds to them in messaging as well. And so, maybe to go to your campaign, I don't know, I know, again, like I said, there's an entire video about this, so you don't have to get too into the weeds. But, part of your campaign was kind of centering these sort of pro-working class economic issues. So maybe say a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. And well, I'll start by saying two things. One of them is, I lost my election, so people can take whatever I say with a grain of salt. And also the other point is, obviously some of this is anecdotal. News. To your surprise, I know I did not interview every single Black person in Philadelphia, so I'm talking kind of anecdotally here, right?
I'm just kidding.
But like I talked about in the video, the district I ran in and I live in is majority working class Black communities, and I found on the doors overwhelmingly the response to the message around union jobs, things like trade schools, career technical education, things like that. I just found way disproportionately Black voters responded much more enthusiastically than white voters. And it wasn't that white voters were against this message, but I found the response was more palpable and powerful in Black communities. And again, I don't think it should be rocket science that, communities that are disproportionately dealing with poverty and disinvestment, these issues are going to resonate more. And even I found that when voters would see, in our election literature, seeing the union endorsements, I would often get more enthusiasm, I would find, from Black working people than others. So, just speaking anecdotally, that definitely rung true, and it shouldn't really surprise people about why that would. I mean, think about the the data, I mean, historically in this country, all the way up to now, often the black unemployment rate is double the white unemployment rate. And in certain areas, it might be even triple or quadruple. So, of course, people are going to be very concerned about jobs and poverty in a situation like that.
If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.